Let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar today as we open our second year in the GCC. We're very excited to bring you our first webinar for the season. As you would all know, in 2024, Avatar, India's premier workplace culture consulting company, partnered with Seramount, a strategic professional services firm dedicated to advancing at diversity, equity, and inclusion based in the US, to launch the best companies listing for companies in the Gulf. The 2024 Best Companies for Women in Gulf study unveiled the top 10 companies in the Gulf region that are the leading uh, players in creating inclusive and enabling work environments for women. You can find the top 10 companies and their best practices at avtaring.com. We will post the link in the chat window for you shortly. So this evening promises to be an insightful and thought-provoking one. We will begin with a presentation on the BCWG study, followed by an exciting panel discussion with an accomplished group of leaders who are paving the way for more gender-inclusive workplaces. Without further delay, let's begin. Our first speaker is a young and dynamic leader and advocate for workplace culture solutions, Anjuji Parvati, Vice President, Research and Solutions at Avatar, who leads research-driven DEI initiatives and heads Corporate India's largest diversity analytics exercises, the Avatar and Seramount Best Companies for Women, both in India and the Gulf. With her extensive expertise, Anju has co-authored numerous impactful papers on DEI. Over to you, Anju.
Thank you so much, Rashmi, for that introduction. Very good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this very important discussion today. Let me just bring up my screen. Give me a moment. Rashmi, requesting a cue from you that the screen is visible.
Absolutely visible, Anju. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. So before we get into the study per se, we also wanted for the August audience gathered today here, we also wanted to introduce Avatar and Seramount, the two organizations from very different geographies across the globe that have come together to launch the best companies for women studies today in India and in Gulf. Avatar is India's premier diversity, equity, and inclusion solutions firm, steeped in a lot of workplace-centric researches, creator of many DI firsts in India, including India's first recruitment program for women on career breaks, evangelists of workplace culture solutions in over 300 organizations, recognized globally by organizations like Stanford GSB and the Straits Times Singapore. We've been conducting the best companies for women in India study in India for 9 years and in Gulf for a year now. Seramount is based out of the US, a strategic professional services firm championing and advancing DEI, formerly called Working Mother Media, working with the top corporates and clienteles across United States, and have been conducting the best companies for women study in the US for the past 39 years. So that's the rich legacy of the study in both America and in India. And we are very proud that we continue the legacy, and we've launched the study in an extremely diverse geography like the Gulf Cooperation Council. A quick look of the global charters of the study. As I mentioned, in the United States, Seramount, the study is conducted under the aegis of Seramount. In India, Best Companies for Women is run jointly by Avatar and Seramount, and in Gulf, it is again run jointly by Avatar and Seramount. Over the past 9 editions of the study in India, we have had 9 very successful editions, 300 plus companies in India participating across all industries, geographies in the Indian region. That's a little bit about the India study. It is a very metric-centric study, so a lot of gender diversity matrices are collated very specific to gender inclusion parameters in the workplace. The top 10 and the best companies are chosen purely based on policy impact and the data that organizations submit via application form. The best companies listing have always been purely alphabetical in nature, and this is a system that we follow in the Gulf region as well. A lot of best practice collation. I'm going to unpack the best practices part a little bit more as we move through the session. And the winners are celebrated and felicitated at India's largest culture conclave around DEI called the Best Practices of the Best Conference. As I mentioned, in the United States, Seramount has been conducting the study for the past 39 years in its 40th year now. The best companies are chosen basis an application form with over 400 questions, and the contours of the application form cover various nuances around inclusion, accountability, culture, and management accountability around policies and practices that help all talent thrive in the workplace. Very happy to quickly give you a recap of what happened in the region in Gulf in 2024. So edition 1 was launched in 2024. Applicant companies filled a metric-based application form. So it was a questionnaire, not an employee feedback survey that organizations conducted. Instead, it was a questionnaire that was filled by the HR representatives from organizations. The top 10 best companies in Gulf were chosen purely based on diversity benchmarks and practices. The listing was exactly alphabetical in nature. We also collated a repository of best practices and important references for benchmarks in the market, and winners were felicitated at the Best of the Best conference. We will have representatives from the winning companies as well talking shortly about more details about the study and the organizational vision towards gender inclusion. This is the alphabetical listing, the inaugural 2024 Avatar and Seramount Top 10 Best Companies for Women in Gulf. A to Z alphabetical listing is what you see. Very proud to see that we have had representation from very diverse industries, from organizations that are global in nature, but with very specific local charters in terms of driving inclusive culture in the region. So that's the list of companies. Repeating this again, all listings that you see, the companies are listed in an alphabetical manner. What are the contours of the best company study? So how were companies that applied to the study evaluated to arrive at the top 10 listing that we saw? The various segments that the study focuses on include the important 7 pillars that you see up on screen, right from workforce profile, which is basically your talent distribution and how diversity is embedded in that. So gender diversity ratios across different levels in the organization, different roles in the organization, and so on. Recruitment, retention, and advancement practices towards helping all talent thrive. So be it programs for mentoring or programs for business resource groups or ERGs or programs for recruiting diversity talent, all of that come under this head. Safety and security becomes a very important third pillar because gender inclusive work environments are also gender sensitive, where safety and security of all professionals are very basic in nature. Flexible working and different modalities of flexible work is a very important pillar in the study. So this includes variants of flexible working, including work from home, including flexible time, and so on. Parental leave and parental benefits, another important pillar that the study examines and includes all versions of parental leave, including maternity leave, paternity leave, adoption leave, and the kind of offerings and support that companies have towards that. Benefits and work-life programs refer to programs that companies have towards improving the overall work-life integration quality, be it stress management programs that companies host or programs for professional course reimbursements that companies host and so on. And the final pillar, last but not the least, culture and management accountability, a very, very important pillar in driving the entire strategy towards creating workplaces where all talent can thrive. So where all people leaders are empowered and enabled to manage diverse workforces, and there is strong accountability when it comes to creating an effective inclusive strategy at the workplace. So those are the important study pillars, and these pillars are the same across all the global charters of the study. A quick snapshot of certain key parameters that emerged from the Best Companies for Women in Gulf BCWG in 2024, the inaugural top 10 companies. What did we discover about the gender distribution in the best companies across levels? Overall, the representation stood at very close to 29% at 28.5. The stack managerial level, non-managerial or entry level upward to corporate executive level is what you see. Very proud to see that all the numbers are 20% and above, which is a very important takeaway for all of us. The fact that these organizations are very intentional about retaining and advancing talent and maintaining a balance across, the levels that we have. In terms of more cuts around women in leadership is what you see here. So the percentage of women, so all the green bars are the percentage of women, right? And all the gray bars are the percentage of men. Amongst top 20 earners in the top 10 organizations collectively, 27% were women. Be it board of directors, the representation is what you see. But what we also see that when we look at finer slices and dices of women in leadership, the percentages become minuscule when it comes to direct reportees to CEO or direct reportees to CEOs with P&L responsibilities, the percentages of women. So these are important snapshots of what we collectively learned from the market, and that's exactly the power and ethos of the study, the fact that the study helps in creating very useful benchmarks similar to these across regions that the study operates in. What you see up next is a snapshot of the kind of programs that these companies offer and the percentage of companies offering these programs. So from affinity groups or ERGs or networks, as we call them, employee networks, 70% of organization offering them to mentoring, to career sponsorship, leadership training, executive coaching, professional development programs, P&L training, career counseling, technical skill training, high potential programs, succession planning. All of these are programs with intentional focus that organizations, the top 10 organizations drove in the region. And that's the percentages that you see is the percentage of organizations that offered each of these initiatives amongst the top 10 companies. So that's a quick snapshot of the kind of programs and why we call them, the best companies, right? It's because they have a combination of many of these programs that help create workplaces where all talent can thrive, and there is a strong spirit of equitable advancement pathways for all talent. This is a snapshot of programs that organizations had very specifically to improve the entire challenges around maternity management and ensuring that women who leave on maternity leave are able to engage with the organization and come back. So right from having a structured phase back program, which is a formal program earmarked to welcome women back into the workplace post maternity leave, to providing support for postpartum stress and depression, having channels for these, to helping women stay in touch with the workplace while they were on maternity leave, including e-learning courses and programs, or using apps that could connect women to the workplace during mat leave, or earmarked stay in touch days where they could engage with their supervisor and the team if they chose to. So all these models, and you would see that there are initiatives that are weaved in through the maternity management continuum. So before maternity leave, during mat leave, and post maternity leave, the kind of programs that organizations offer and the percentage of companies offering this is what you see on screen. And this is the span of fully paid parental leave. What is the minimum offered? What is the average offered? And what is the maximum offered is what you see across the best companies for women in Gulf in 2024. So the average fully paid maternity leave clocked at 12.4 weeks last year. And the average fully paid paternity leave clocked at close to 8 days last year. So these are all very important matrices that we will continue to monitor through this year's outreach and initiative as well, through the fact that the Best Companies study will cover all of these aspects and more when it comes to inclusion of all talent at the workplace. Collectively, because of the efforts put in by organization, the snapshot that you see is the maternity retention rate in the best companies in 2024, 70% maternity retention rate. And that also explains why the percentage representation of women across levels, non-managerial to managerial to senior managerial to corporate executive levels, stood reasonably stable across the best companies. Of course, after all the data was tabulated and the best companies identified, we had a beautiful celebration of the top 10 companies for women in Gulf. And this was at the Best of the Best Gulf Conference 2024, which we hosted in September 2024 in Dubai. So that's a snapshot of all the amazing discussions that we had. A few of the speakers who are going to speak to us were also part of the conference last year. So wonderful to host them again. And we look forward to every organizational representative participating in the study and being part of our beautiful capture and the winners list this year on. So that's a quick walk down the memory lane as to what happened in 2024 and a snapshot of the same. In terms of more details about the BCWG 2025, please remember that this is an entirely free exercise for organizations to participate in. The only investment that we require of organizations to participate in the study and stand an opportunity to win is the investment of time, energy, and effort. That is the only investment. It is not a pay-to-participate exercise. There were more companies that participated, that applied to the study, but we do not name companies outside of the list anywhere in the idea of protecting the confidentiality of the company. However, companies which participate and do not feature still have access to various resources that the study offers, including benchmarking opportunities, including getting a free scorecard, which tells exactly which are those areas. I presented 7 pillars, right? So which are those areas that you are doing well and which are those areas that need improvement and focus on. Highly customized benchmarking reports, these are available on procurement. So while the study is free, if you want to do very specific market benchmarking through your participation in the exercise, that is a model and that is an offering you can explore. It is strictly an employer exercise. It is a standardized application form that every applicant company will fill in, will populate with matrices and data by the HR or the DEI team. The study does not involve any perceptual employee survey. So it is not an experience or perception-based study. Rather, it is based on proof of concept and hard outcome matrices and data that we look at. Alphabetical listing of women in Gulf is what will be the culmination of the study in 2025 as well. And it's going to be a pan-industry listing. So as you saw, the inaugural listing had companies from various industries listed in an alphabetical manner. So, and it had, industry representation across. In terms of the benefits of participation, I already talked about most of them. Access to the largest, very region-specific, deep diversity benchmarking platform, opportunity to learn from the best-in-class companies and how they have successfully implemented initiatives around gender inclusion, create a mechanism for data rigor and discipline in terms of monitoring important matrices that have a DI dimension, and of course, in the event that you participate and you win, positive employer branding as a diversity-friendly company. This is the process that we follow. All completed applications will be scored and every applicant company will be given an overall rank. This free scorecard will be made available to every organization that submits a completed application form, irrespective of whether they feature in the winners listing or not. The rankings will remain strictly confidential to the company and its top leadership. It will not be communicated down the line because the public listing is alphabetical in nature. The process of participation is this. The first step is an expression of interest. You can register clicking the online link. Our team will also be shortly posting the registration link on the chat window through this session as well. It's a quick 10-question form that you need to fill in. Then once a company registers, we move you on to the stage of confirmation of participation, where you sign a declaration in terms of understanding the modalities of the study and the fact that this is how the study will be positioned. And then once that's done is when we move an organization to the application stage, where every company will submit one single copy of the completed application via an online encrypted link. So the entire confidentiality part of it is taken care of through the encrypted online link process that we follow to solicit applications. Applications this year are due in April 2025. That's the timeline that we are looking at. September 2024 is the launch. April 2025 is when we are looking at applications. It is the launch of the registration that happened in Jan. May 2025 is when we will do the winner notifications, and June 2025 is when we will have the second edition of the best practices of the best conference in Gulf. That's a quick snapshot of media engagement that we did regarding the study again in Dubai earlier towards the end of last year, November 2024. That's our founder president, Dr. Soundarya, founder president of Avtar, and the entire media engagement. Very happy to share that we were covered extensively by media across UAE, and that's a quick snapshot of that. Any further questions, if you have, happy to take them, or you can post them in the chat window. We'll be happy to address them through the team as well. Thank you so much, and back to you, Rashmi.
Thank you, Anju. I'm sure we will have some questions by as we go. And thank you for that presentation. It was very, very enlightening, very demystifying the whole thing. And I'm sure all of us are keen to be part of the BCWG study. It's definitely a short way to ensure you win the gender inclusion game. So now on to the highlight of the evening, a panel discussion on gender inclusion for organizational growth. We've all been waiting for this. We have with us an exceptional lineup of speakers who bring a wealth of experience and diverse perspectives on this very, very important topic. Allow me to introduce them. We have Radhika Lajawala. Radhika is the Senior Pricing Manager for the Intra-Gulf market at Maersk. With her deep expertise in business strategy and market analytics, she has been a key driver in delivering innovative solutions that align with organizational goals. Radhika's insights into fostering inclusion in traditionally male-dominated industries makes her a valuable contributor to this discussion. Welcome, Radhika. We have with us Maria Manzoor. Maria serves as the People and Communications Director at Kone Elevators for the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa regions. With over 2 decades of experience, Maria is a seasoned HR leader specializing in creating high-performance workplace cultures and championing diversity and inclusion. Her extensive career includes leadership roles at global organizations like Ramboll and Atos. Welcome, Maria. We also have Jihan El Sagir. Jihan is the country HR partner for KSA and the Middle East at Bayer. With 15 years of experience across various industries such as tech, retail, and pharmaceuticals, she brings expertise in talent development, employee engagement, and change management. Jihan is also the co-leader of GROW, which is growing representation and opportunities for women, impactful initiative focused on women empowerment. Welcome, Jihan. Looking forward to this discussion. And finally, moderating this panel discussion is Karthik Ekambaram. Karthik is the co-founder and head of solutions at Avatar and a renowned DI specialist. With an MBA and with over 20 plus years of experience in talent strategy and workforce diversity consulting, Karthik has worked with Fortune 500 companies to create inclusive workplaces. He has also been recognized with the Diversity Leadership Award by the Congress HRD, World HRD Congress. A short note to the audience, you can drop in your questions in the chat window. We will be having a 10-minute Q&A at the end of this discussion. So welcome to this discussion. Over to you, Karthik.
Yeah, thank you, Rashmi and Anju for setting the context, and Anju for walking us through the details of the best companies for women in the study. Today, we are very honored and privileged to have three exceptional leaders who've been doing some amazing work in the Gulf region. So we have with us Maria, Jihan, and Radhika, who've been individually very passionate about the subject of inclusion and specifically the workforce participation of women in the Gulf, and also from an organization perspective, they are actually leading many initiatives, which is creating this overall culture of inclusion within their own organization. And again, they also influence the policies and programs for not just one country, but they're also responsible for multiple countries in the Middle East region, which is still a very humongous task, right? Even though Gulf could be and the Middle East could be, you could define them as one geography, but within that you have different countries, policies and practices and culture which is specific to those countries, and therefore I think it's very complex, as diverse. The complexity is also very diverse as the topic that we're all dealing with today. So I think we are going to have some great insights from all these three leaders today, and thanks again, once again, Maria, Radhika, and Jian, for your valuable time. We are looking forward to some great insights from you as to how are you tackling some of the challenges, how you're leveraging some of the opportunities that are in front of you to see how we can truly build world-class, global, inclusive organizations and great work culture. And therefore, we have greater employee engagement and employee productivity and output, right? And so, with that, I would just like to request each one of you from your opening sort of context setting, your views on the overall aspect of the appreciation of DEI in the Gulf region specifically, and what do you think are some of the top priorities specifically? What has happened in the last couple of years, right? What do you think are some top priorities that every organization, every leader has to really focus on? Your opening thoughts on that, and I would request Radhika, could you start the panel with your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Karthik, and thank you, Avatar team, for having all of us here. So, when we talk about the Gulf region, I'd say the Gulf region in the last couple of years has changed. But if I had to give you a perspective, it's a region which is very rich in cultural heritage and traditions, like we've historically seen. And with that, we also see that there is a perceived perception about the region, especially around women who are perceived as they are limited by the choices that their family would make for them or by the legal nature that would be imposed on them, for example, for the Saudi, right? So, however, this has changed over the years. Some of you may know that the UAE and Saudi and a few other countries like Bahrain, Qatar, etc., Kuwait have done a lot of work as a government in the Gulf countries also, where there are policies that have come out. If I talk about a certain few policies in the Saudi, the legal policy around, the restrictions that women had, or in the UAE where it's very well laid out, and UAE is one of, they also work very closely with the UN, or in other countries, where women are looked to come into the government as well. So, things are changing, if I'd say, in the Gulf region out here. And with this change, I think what organizations are also seeing is a lot of opportunity. Because if I had to say earlier, with these restrictions, for example, if there's a restriction on travel, for a lady to work in an organization and go out for a conference would have been very difficult, or they weren't allowed to drive, which was the case a couple of years ago in certain countries, right? It would be difficult to come to a workplace. So things like this have changed over time. And with this opening up, I think it has opened doors for the corporates also to have women come in. However, while I say that, while the government is promoting a lot of things, I think for corporates also, we need to latch on to this and see where is it that we have opportunities. So I'd like to just quote an example of something that Musk did with the opening up of Saudi. We have a logistics park that employs around that is opening up around 2,500 jobs, and we have a training program especially for women who would come in the labor class, where women who've been at home most times are coming into the corporates in a warehouse who would get training. And today they started in September, and in December I can proudly say that we've 18 girls have enrolled on this, who also run forklifts in a very male dominated industry, which is logistics. So I'd say this is an opportunity that we got because the government also opened up. So similarly, there are many, and I think we only need to see where is it that we can make the difference as an organization. Karthik, you're on mute.
Radhika, for starting the conversation with some very positive work that is happening at Maersk, right? With respect to the Saudi initiative that is currently happening. You interestingly touch upon the culture, the heritage part of it, and how it hugely impacts, right? And while I spoke about the Gulf, probably as 7, the Middle East, more countries, but I think individually each organization, I'm sure if you visit your office in Dubai, there must be at least 40 nationalities working. It's just an office in Dubai, right? So I think it also brings in that multiple forms of diversity from people from different countries working in the same office, not just in the organization, represent globally, but in just one location. And therefore, the entire aspect of inclusion becomes even much more critical, right? With that, Maria, I would also like you to, while giving a context, if you could also add a pointer to that in terms of we're seeing so much change happening specifically in the last 4 5 years, at least from our observations, with respect to having more women entering to the workplace. And I think Radhika, you also spoke about the change that is happening in the Saudi, but and again, all the countries in the Gulf region, with a lot of focus from the government in terms of having women council, right, gender council, council hall happening. You could also add a point towards now, what are things that is actually initiating some of these changes or pushing for some of these changes, Maria?
Yeah, thank you, Karthik, and thank you for having me in this very important discussion. So I think UAE is leading the way in the GCC overall when it comes to gender inclusion, and UAE overall is always leading the way and progressing very quickly and with speed. So I think what UAE realized quite early on is that they need to lead the way. And I think in terms of legal reforms that have happened, laws that are ensuring equal pay, anti-discrimination, mandatory female representation on corporate boards, that has really helped propel this further. And we also see women in leadership. UAE has a strong presence of women in the government, with many female ministers leading key sectors. So I think those are two really important points. And let's not forget the basic fundamental need, which is leadership commitment, right? The UAE leadership has shown leadership commitment in driving this forward. And then, of course, we have other activities. For example, we have incentives for companies. So we've seen that organizations that demonstrate gender inclusive policies have received government recognition and awards. So that's a way to incentivize and propel this even further. And then We also see in the education sector that UAE has heavily invested in STEM education for women, creating more opportunities for women in tech and finance and different government sectors. So I think these initiatives overall really lead the way and show what a country and a government with positive law and regulations can do to push this forward. And I think Saudi's commitment, as Radhika mentioned, is also seen. So I think it's just a matter of time for the rest of the GCC countries to follow suit.
Thank you, Maria. I think some of the initiatives from the government is also really sort of driving this. But I think organizations like you always believed in this, and I think what is now is when both the corporates and the government are able to work together, right? And I think there is this greater transformation and faster change that we can really expect. And I think that is what prompting. I think there is a commitment both from an organization level and I think from the government as well is actually pushing such a faster development in this particular space, Maria. Jihan, your thoughts? And again, we have three organizations for which the entire aspect of diversity is not so easy compared to a tech organization, right? And it's, Jihan, you could have also throw some light on that from your opening thoughts.
Yes, thank you so much, Karthik, and thank you for Avatar for the opportunity. I would definitely agree with what already Radhika and Maria have mentioned, and I think what has helped so far a lot, definitely we have the government part that was helping, we have the corporate part that was leading, and we are kind of lucky that we are coming from global multinationals that have been a little bit working progressively on such topics of diversity. Also, there has been a rise in the founding of organizations, NGOs that are working, particularly driving diversity initiatives, equity and inclusion globally as well as locally. And we have been partnering with those across the Middle East region, whether for empowering women, for different types of diversity, discussing even disabilities, for example. We are blessed here in the Middle East region, in the Gulf specifically, that certain kinds of diversity do come by nature, So if we're going to discuss nationalities, for example, our office has in Dubai 34 different nationalities, and that is something that comes really quite naturally. But I think what has been really supportive is data, and data is now money, let's say. So the more that we have analysis, the more data that we have on how diversity is impacting business performance, how diversity is resulting in the financial returns on different on companies that are, for example, having a diversified employee base, whether it is gender employee base diversity, or disability, or even from a background diversity. And this is something that at Bayer we have been heavily also trying to raise awareness on. It's not only about nationality, it's not about ethnicity, it's not about gender or disability, but also certain types of diversity that we can be really conscious of. For example, as you were mentioning, Karthik, the industry itself. We are a pharmaceutical industry, a life science industry, but we don't want to have kind of monotonous, a type of thinking within the organization, right? So we try to tap as much as how into opportunities where we can get employees on board from different backgrounds and from different industries, and that could create a different platform for innovation within the organization that could also increase into kind of creativity boost within the organization. And that is all being supported by data. So definitely the organizations themselves are tracking the progress that is, has been happening for the past few years, but also research from companies as Avatar. We follow, for example, our providers, Willis Towers Watson, Mercer, McKinsey, Harvard Business Reviews. We always follow these kind of reliable sources that could help us support our cases in our to drive our initiatives in terms of diversity.
Thank you, John. I think a couple of things that you spoke sort of was of interest to me. and is highly relevant to the discussion today. While you said, in many cases, the diversity could be very natural, and specifically in the Gulf, where you're able to attract the people from different geographies, right, and working together, it could be natural. But inclusion is a challenge, right? That cannot be just natural. I think we really need to work hard on it. So that's one important aspect that we need to focus on. So how do you build this culture of inclusion when you have people from different geographies, and even within the entire aspect of gender and women, inclusion of women? So when you have women from different nationalities, every woman is impacted by their own nationalities, their own society, and their own culture, and the needs are also very different, right? The way their careers is influenced by the society, their families, the values that is there. And another one that you spoke about is the data part of it. And the best company study is all about that, Jian, in terms of how do we encourage more and more companies to be participate. And that's how we're really keen to have more companies actually being part of this particular initiative. And one of the reasons that we also sort of, the philosophy behind the studies, have more companies participating without any entry barrier. That's why you don't have a registration fee. We want companies to start putting some basic matrices in place, start tracking those data not just from their own individual progress, but also benchmarking with other organizations, the best in class organization. And that's completely the philosophy of the best company study. Thanks a lot, Jihan, for your great thoughts on that. Maria, I would like to go to you, and I just want to link it to what Jihan spoke about. I know the diversity comes very natural, it's natural, right? And but as I said, inclusion is not so easy when you have this different intersectionalities happening, right? You could have gender, women, but different nationalities, and again, the nationality is again from different geographies and different continents, right? Then the people from the Middle East, other parts of Asia, then you have people from Europe and US. Again, very different intersectionality. And you also have women from different generations, Maria, right? And again, it's a huge mix. But how do you handle those aspects of inclusion at your workplace, Maria?
Yeah, thanks, Karthik. I think we do it in several different ways. So I think, we always in general talk about emotional intelligence and how important that is, and that's obviously very important in this context as well. But in the context of the landscape we're in, and in the part of the world we're in, I think cultural intelligence has become front and center. And I think leaders need to be very versant when it comes to cultural intelligence, because there are many nuances in how we communicate, how we make our voices heard, and what comes from a global perspective might not be suitable on a local level. So those are some things and some aspects that we have been focusing on to make sure that we have an open forum where people can bring their concerns and where people are open to listen and hear feedback as well, so that we sift through the misunderstandings that may happen, which is very common when we have so many different cultures and so much diversity. So that's one point. And then, of course, Anju mentioned ERGs. We have an ERG we call Spark, which is for female employees, but also male allies. And I think that's another really good way for us to make sure that we discuss any challenges that we may have when it comes to inclusion and when it comes to diversity, and where both female and male employees have an opportunity to bring topics to the table. We currently don't have a local chapter, but that's actually what we're going to focus on this year, to establish a local chapter where we will be focusing and drilling down more on the local challenges that we have. Apart from that, I think policies and processes that clarify how we want to work. I mean, it sounds a bit maybe boring, but I think it's important when we are in such a diverse environment. I mean, I'm just looking at, for example, UAE as a country. They have very clear policies, rules and regulations about things. And that's, in my opinion, that's why things work so well in this country, because it's very clear what the expectations are. And of course, our policies are inclusive. We try and make sure that we take all the different aspects of our population into consideration. So those are some of the ways that we try and make sure that we take the diversity into account and bring everyone to the table and make sure that they feel included. Externally, of course, we are trying very hard to make sure we reach out not just to the typical populations that we would reach out when we look at hiring, but also look at female talent, not only in the university level, but in earlier stages, so that we can increase their interest in STEM. The way I see it and the way leadership sees it here is that we're not just caring about Kone, we're caring about the societies we're in, right? So supporting females at an earlier age and informing them and raising awareness on what it means to work in any STEM-related industry, so that the interest increases and the biases also are quashed. So I think those are some of the ways that we're not only helping our company, but also society to elevate when it comes to diversity and inclusion.
Great points, Maria. And a couple of things I just noted. One aspect of this entire one is the emotional intelligence. But another important point that you spoke about is cultural intelligence. How do you get yourself more familiarized with different cultures, interact with different people, build that cultural competency, right? It is as good as any skill that you need today to work in a very global organization in a sort of a global location like Dubai and various other countries in the Gulf, where you have representation of different nationalities being there. The cultural importance plays a very important role here, right? Appreciating different values and able to learn and live with each other and work with each other is going to be another very important point. Another thing that I also loved, I think the point that you spoke about, sometimes we can also learn from government. You are usually appreciative of the UAE government's clarity and I think unclear policies, and therefore there is no ambiguity, right? And there is a clear sort of a vision and a mission and a purpose which is backed by policy. And I think each one of us in every organization can have learned from that as well. Be clear, have very clear policies, clear guidelines, so that it's much easier for people to follow. Right, that becomes very important. Sometimes some of these are very ambiguous, and you really don't know what to do and what they actually meant for. Great points, Maria. Radhika, I would like to come to you because you spoke about this entire aspect of, the logistics business and how you now looking at having more women in the Saudi region. But what has been your experience? I'm sure it was not easy, right? But how did you ensure that? I think you mentioned about hiring about 18 people were onboarded, right? But how did you go through the process? What are some of the challenges? But how do you overcome some of those, Radhika?
Thank you, Karthik. And I think, one is the government states and makes it free for the women. The other is, do the women feel confident to come to work? Right? And there's a very big change on that one because, it's like, okay, I can give an example. Like the woman is inside the door all the time, and then you open the door, she suddenly wouldn't know how to put her first foot out, right? And I think I like what Maria said, where she said, catch them young. That is one. So catch them young and give them that confidence, I'd say. So, the reason why I spoke about the training program is also, it's not, getting women, it's not just about hiring, right? It's also putting them up for success. Because if you look at the diversity of gender that we have, usually women, if they are 100% confident, they will say, I'm 50% confident. That's how we are inbuilt. Right. And the confidence will come when, the education is there, the learning is there, the training is there. And we also break the stereotypes that we have regarding a certain job. So while Saudi is one of the examples, we have an all pink warehouse in India. That's also there. So, I'll just give you an example of how we work towards it, right? So it's not just about one is getting the women, but there's a lot of dialogue that happens when we speak, and there are qualified people who speak with these women who come in, right? Once we get them. So if I can just give you the India example for more clarity, in that particular rural area, right, what we did was we actually went to the village and spoke to a lot of women and their spouses or their children to let them come to work. So, that much of granularity or going to that depth because there is a commitment behind it. So, similarly in Saudi, when we got the women on board, we also taught them how to train on using forklifts or, in the warehouse security. And, there are certain very good videos on YouTube if you're interested, but you'll see there are a lot of male allies that they also had along with them. So while they had to learn with men how to use this, because obviously that job was done by men before, the good part is because the women wanted to step out and they wanted to do something in life, today the men say that they do a much better job than was done earlier, which then becomes a success story, which we then share all across the organization, which gets more women in the fold, right? It's like it's got a domino effect, a very positive domino effect on the rest of them. And that's how they go out in the society. They talk about, what did they learn and how that gives them the freedom, etc. And that's how, we motivate and we get more. But it's baby steps, it's one by one. And like Maria said earlier, it's also the is what the government has. We have an 18-month maternity policy. 18 weeks, my bad. 18 weeks maternity policy, right? Which is our global standard. So those kind of things in policies really help where there's flexible work, maternity or any other, right? So that's what we've done when it comes to these warehouses.
Thank you, Radhika. Before I go to Jihan, I just have a follow-up question. But what are some of the things that initiatives or sensitization do you have to do with the men who are already there? Did you have to do something?
Yeah. So with the men, one is how do you make them an ally? I think the first step is that where, how do you get them on board the journey? And I'll give you a personal experience. I sit out of Dubai, and when we speak to a few male colleagues, right, and we speak to their leaders, uh, how is it that you handle the objections that they would have? And we did see some objections coming from men. The basic would be like, okay, if women are going to do this, what about us? Are we not going to get promoted in the future? Stuff like that. So, one is how do you handle those objections that they would have? And I'd say handle it very openly and do not shun them down. Because it's a long journey. It's not just one step, it's a very long journey, and you need to have them on board till the end, right? Because like I said, it's not just about hiring them, but it's also about having them in the company very happily staying. So I think that was the first step. And also from a leadership perspective, I think it has to start from the top. It absolutely has to start from the top. And then, of course, we've got the ERGs who build the culture around inclusivity, which comes through trainings, which comes through education. So, on an everyday level, how do we get people? And how do we have those ambassadors? Like we have the ERG team here. So, how do we have those ambassadors who are creating that safe space for people to come and talk about? And I'd say it's not something which I'd say every time, 100% confidence that we have them on board, but it's a journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, as you rightly said, it's a journey. I think sometimes the transformation can be much quicker than what we expected, but I think we still need to, it can be slower also. I think just sticking to that and staying committed is very important, Radhika. Jihan, one of the things that I really wanted to ask you, right? And I think from the Gulf and from our understanding and from the study that we did as well, there is a good representation of women. So even say compared to India, right? While we are still working on to see how do we increase it, I think you have a very good representation of women. But one thing, data that I saw, right, and women handling profit and loss roles, P&L roles, truly the business role is very less. It's not even 2%, at least from the companies which participated. So how do you work on this, Jihan, right? While you have a lot more women now in your organizations, right, at different levels, but truly those leadership positions, business positions. So how do you, how is Bayer working on this, Jihan?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Kartik. So, one of the things that we have to kind of first recognize, as Radhika was saying, that this is a journey, okay? So it's not something that just happens overnight, right? And in the past few years, what we have been focusing on at Bayer is to start with, as a first goal, is to increase the representation of females, okay? So we have really worked heavily on just the recruitment part, that we ensure that our policies and our practices do ensure that we have an additional female colleagues being onboarded onto Bayer. So we have increased our overall employee female base, as well as in terms of executive positions or director and above positions, let's call them here in the Middle East. So currently we are between, I think, around 37% overall in female representation, and somewhere around 32% of our director level colleagues is female. One of the things that we have observed is the, let's say, journey in between, so we hire a lot of medical reps, that's our industry, that are females, and then from external, we hire the executive level that are females. But the development now is the path that we need to work on. So we've got them on board. What do we do to develop them? So we are finding a little bit, one of the challenges is that how do we transfer more individual contributors into people leaders, into more critical decision makers, and as you mentioned, for example, P&L owners. This year in particular, our business resource group, GROW, is working on, or ERG, is working on one very important element, which is confidence. So a recent study, in 2021, published by HBR, has shown that females actually are not less capable in terms of, if we're talking about the competencies and skills, in terms of, they actually even outperform males when it comes to competencies and skills. But the area that they lack is confidence. So what we are trying to work on is actually how do we position ourselves as females, how we make sure that we are confident enough to apply for that job, to share my achievements, to talk about my successes, to become really conscious about my capabilities and not feel that I am, just less just because I'm a woman. Or one of the very big gaps, or let's say barriers, that our female colleagues are imposing on themselves, especially in the Gulf region, and maybe also in India, for example, considering our culture, is our dual responsibilities of home and work. So, considering that I am a mother, for example, that means I cannot apply for that role. I cannot hold a responsibility such as a P&L owner, and so on. So the focus that we are trying to work on currently is really boosting their confidence through several, definitely, for example, assignments, becoming panelists with regional executives, for example, making them visible, in as many opportunities as we can, to show them that you actually can do the jobs. And eventually it's a journey, and we will work through that journey with them so that they own their capabilities and hopefully reach the target that we are all working on.
Thank you, Jan. I think there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done, right? Both at the entry level, then how do you grow them to the positions? Then you also have a strategy from a lateral hiring perspective, right? It's a combination of multiple things that really needs to build that huge gap. And in fact, I also wanted to extend that question to you, Maria, right? And I think I've also seen from your participation in the best companies for India study, that's one of the goals that we saw is, I think by 2030, you want to be 35% women directors. I think if I remember right, that's one of the goals that you're really working on. Even not looking at the numbers, but how is Kone doing, leveraging this or doing this, Maria? Because I think you're also in an industry which is again very engineering, project-based engineering, working
Yes.
from remote locations. Then how are you going to overcome this challenge and bridge that particular gap?
Yeah, thanks, Kartik, and it's quite a challenge, especially for our industry. The majority of the talent that we hire are engineers, and it's challenging in this part of the world to find female talent, especially in the GCC. but I think we consider ourselves as ahead of the general status of the countries when it comes to workplace policies and the infrastructure that we've put in place to make sure that our female employees feel comfortable. Of course, and I really need to emphasize what both Radhika and Jihan has said, that it's a journey. You know, it doesn't happen overnight, because it also needs a mind shift change with employees. But I think for us, we are focusing on, so in 2024, we actually had lots of different initiatives that we rolled out. Of course, we always have many global initiatives, but we actually focused on a lot of local initiatives. One of them was to have female experience focus groups, where we actually spent time with our female employees, asking them different questions, and really trying to understand and being curious about what is working well for them, what is not working well, what would they like to see and have. And in addition to that, we also rolled out a speak up training for our leaders and our managers, because, you know, creating psychological safety and for people to feel comfortable speaking up, we felt that that was kind of the starting point. And before we did that training, we had a survey that we rolled out to all our employees to gauge what the status quo was. And we then did another survey after the training was done. And with that data, going back to how important data is for decision making, with what I had mentioned, what we had done before, we now have a good insight into what the focus areas needs to be. So one of the things that came out of that is that we are going to work on having a female leadership development program, which is starting on the lower levels. So we're really focusing on entry-level females that we see have high potential. And then we will, you know, grow that leadership training across the ranks. Because this is, we need to be intentional about focusing on this push and growth. We don't have as many females as we would like. Of course, we're also very limited to what the market is offering us. But of course, the intent here is to grow our talent and retain them. And then in the meantime, also attract as many females as we can. So I think this one focus area is going to be really important for us. And as I mentioned before, we also have an ERG, which we're going to roll out as a local chapter. And I think that will also really help us hone in on the areas that are important for female employees, but also male allies.
Yeah. No, thanks, Maria. I think there are three things that I sort of shortlisted as key takeaways from your points. One is, I think a couple of times you said about intent, and I think that is very important, right? That intentionality is very critical to entire aspect. And with that intent, you have the right set of programs to ensure that you're able to really develop them to the next level. Another aspect that you spoke about, this entire aspect of the speak up culture and the psychological safety. And I think it also needs to align with the aspect that you spoke about, which is the cultural intelligence part of it. Right? You can create that culture and all those stuff. But I think you also need to work on an ecosystem which allows people to speak up, which allows people to have that psychological safety to share their thoughts and views. I think all this needs to be done very parallelly, right? You can have all these women leaders or the diversity coming in, but if you don't have the psychological safety there and the speak up culture, they are just going to sort of, not communicate or not forthcoming with their thoughts and views, and it could also be stifling for them to sort of, thrive in the organization, Maria. Right? We have some few questions, and I thought even before let's address some of these questions so that we don't run out of time. I think there was a question from Sati who says we recently read articles on big firms moving away from the DI initiatives. Yes, I think it's again from a very US context, and of course, US has a lot of influence, in kind of operations in multiple countries. But it's very, as of now, it's very US specific, Sati, right? And And I think as with any change and transformation happening, people wait and watch and see how it is progressing for them to really look at. Today we have leaders who are truly committed in front of us talking about DEI, right? Organizations focusing on DEI. So we just really need to see what is happening specifically from a US context, Sati. We have another question. What is one call to action you would give to business leaders in the Middle East to advance gender inclusion for sustainable growth? Over to you. A quick one line on what would be the call to action.
I
One
think,
call to action.
yeah, just one call to action is believe in the D&I strategy and have one. I mean,
Okay.
believe that it can make a difference, and it's not charity, or it's not it is business important, business critical.
Yeah. So have the belief and have the strategy, Radhika. Yeah. Maria?
I think targets, again,
Okay.
going back to data, it's
Yeah, okay.
important to have targets and leadership commitment. I think that's ABC for this.
Yeah, I think it's nicely flows. You have a strategy, then you have a target, then you have a commitment. Jay, I would love to hear from you. What is one call to action?
I would say be intentional. This is not
Okay.
something to have, and it's not going to come on its own, you know. So we
Okay.
need to be committed.
Okay. I think the nobody can dispute the importance of intentionality and intent, right? And that is the key driver for anything and everything that we really want to do. We also have one question. Just what would be that one piece of advice that you would give to young women in the Middle East who aspire to become leaders and make a difference in their respective ecosystems and communities? Jian, you would like to take it? Also, love to hear from others.
Yes, well, as much as a cliche that it might sound from us from a HR perspective, we always say, you know, you are in the driver's seat. So women have the capabilities, as I've mentioned. They are brilliant, they are bright, and they are hard workers. And sorry for me being biased, even sometimes could be more than men. We have strengths, right? So own your strengths, own your success, own your achievements, and be vocal about it. Nowadays, we are more and more seeing the importance of visibility. It's not only about really the technical part, it's also about how do you communicate it, how do you position yourself, your personal brand. This is something that we are trying as much as possible to raise awareness on, that, you know, how do people remember you when you are outside of the room? So if you are going to be in the shadows, no one will really know your potential and your capabilities, and a very limited number of people will be able to sponsor you and speak on your behalf. You are the one in the driver's seat, so make sure that you make the best out of this opportunity.
Thank you, Jian. And I think just an added question, I think Maria and Radhika can also touch upon it, which is, again on the same line, the question on what can organization that specifically, even as career intentional women like you, to do foster a cultural shift that dismantles some of the systemic biases and enables women who are different career stages of the workforce. I think, Jian, I think you also touched upon it, is as much as organizations work on it, it's also the responsibility of women also to break some of those, their own self-limiting biases. Maria, your thoughts, and after that with Radhika, to the Radhika.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's a really good question. I think it perhaps goes back to speaking up, and yes, we're not always feeling psychologically safe, and therefore we may not want to speak up. But I think, we are part of the change, right? So we do need to take that step, even if it feels really scary at times, and we may not be heard the first time, the second time. But we can, if we are the first ones that speak up, we may also make others feel comfortable to speak up. So I think that's a really important part of this, and not to give up. I think it can feel quite disheartening at times for people when they're not being heard or when they're not seeing the changes. But as we said, it's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. And at some point, the message will get across to the people who make the decisions. So, yeah.
Thank you, Maria. Radhika, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think also, ask for support, ask for mentors, because sometimes you may feel you're alone, but you're not. I mean, it's just about asking, right? It's just about finding your allies. It could also be male allies, and that will also help you change their thought. So think of it both ways, right? What they could help you with and how you could build that culture back with them, right? And mentorship, very important. I think that's a lever that we're trying to also in our company exercise a lot. Like I have a CFO who's my mentor, and she's a very bold lady. I mean, I've learned a lot. So, similarly, you may not know that, but just be bold, just the fact that uh, it's okay to go out there and fail. I mean, we often are scared as women to fail. So don't be, it's okay. I mean, it's fine. And you have your own ways to get over everything, right? At the end of the day, where you reach will matter. It's okay if you have failures are I think just embrace them, even if corporate. Don't be too hard on yourself. So yeah.
Okay, great points. I think take the failures in a stride, right? And just we have to move on and move forward, right? And I think that is very important, Radhika, the point that you really shared. I have a question to Jihan. Jihan, and I think we touched upon this entire aspect of this allyship, right? And I'm sure we are going to talk about the moment we talk about allyship. I think we talk about male allyship. I think, right? But I think the allyship here need not be the men as well. The role that successful women leaders within the organization at whatever level they are, right? For example, if you are at a mid-career level, I'm sure you can be a mentor to a person who's just entering to the everybody has a responsibility. So how do we really ensure that culture of allyship, just not as a just not as a responsibility of the leaders, maybe just not as a responsibility of men, but how do you the entire organization and everyone sort of become allies to the people who are there, either the peers or even people that just entering the organizations, yeah.
Thank you so much, Karthik. So as Bayer in the Middle East, as an organization, what we have done is that we have been raising awareness for the past maybe 2 years on the importance of networking, and not only building networks, it's how to leverage these networks, whether you are a female or a male. At the same time, we do raise a flag that says, females could be less comfortable in reaching out to their networks, whether they are allies, whether they are sponsors, mentors even, and ask for support on specific topics. So they are by nature a bit less more comfortable than males, and we see that very clearly on LinkedIn, for example. If I have a male connection and he needs me to support him in something, he could very easily reach out, even if I'm not really familiar with the person. While a female professional could really want someone who's really very, very well connected with, having genuine relationships with, until she reaches out to that person. So we really try to raise so much awareness on these differences to our entire community in Bayer, so that we have that sense of, maybe call it it's a kind of education that we are trying to enhance in our community, not only for us as a company, but for us as a community as well. This is impacting our daughters, our sisters, our wives, and so on. So it could be a piece of advice that one of my colleagues could pass on to his wife who's struggling at work, for example. How do you reach out to a male colleague to, for example, be your ally or be your sponsor? So this is one of the things that we really do work on. And another thing that we also have flagged to say is also based on studies, it shows that females who progress in their careers are mostly mentored or supported by other females who are at higher levels than them. So this is something that comes, as I mentioned, a bit more comfortable to females. It's built on genuine shallow, let's say, kind of connection that happens, which could be a case when it is a male. So we have provided workshops with external experts on networking that come and support our colleagues in terms of, what could be the etiquette of networking to say, how do they, become more confident in reaching out to people, whether internally or externally. And we also provide I wouldn't call it a series, but even real life examples from panels within the organization on colleagues, males and females, who have made career progression through networking and through building allies, allies and having these relationships. So it's a continuous discussion again, but there are so many ways that we can keep the discussion going.
Thank you. Thank you, John. I think we are coming close to the panel discussion. And the closing note, I would really request all of you to share what do you see, how do you see the future of DI in the Gulf? What do you think are some of the key priorities or focus for us in the next 1 year or so, right? What is going to be the key drivers for change, right? If organizations are truly doing it, and there's so many things that is happening, but your thoughts on, how do you see this future with respect to DI within the Gulf region? Maria, would you like to take it first?
Sure. Thank you, Karthik. I think there are lots of opportunities, and like I mentioned before, I think UAE is leading the way, and I think we can look at the opportunities in different sectors or parts of initiatives. I think, for example, education and awareness programs. I know UAE is revisiting the education system, for example, and there, we could perhaps what could be focused on is incorporating gender studies or inclusive policies, but also more exposure for students to diverse role models, seeing more female role models that will then hopefully eventually break the stereotypes earlier on in earlier ages. Then, of course, we have technology and AI, remote work, online learning, automation, and that may help in reducing bias. And I think AI is, something that's being discussed now. It's part of the everyday conversation in this part of the world. So I see that it's already there, but it will definitely support this development. I think with the younger generation who are now being part of these changes, they will definitely become different types of leaders as opposed to the old leadership styles that we have seen. I think that will definitely also propel this maybe even quicker than we think. I think even if I look at the local UAE or Saudi population, there's a stark difference in the way they look at the world, but also their cultures and countries. And then I would expect that laws and policies will keep evolving. And I think, again, and I want to emphasize this because I think it's not just looking at it from a company perspective, but it's more about, how do we look at our social responsibility and the societies that we live in. I mean, yes, we are all working for companies, but we're all living here as well. And we can all contribute to making better and more evolved societies. So I think that will definitely help. And when private companies and organizations focus on changing their workplace culture, which of course includes people, ultimately, I hope that will also help, make this change even quicker. And we will be in a different situation that's even better than we are right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Radhika, your thoughts on how do you see the next 1 year specifically to the Gulf region?
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with everything that Maria said. And a little different view is with so many changes happening, I think the numbers will rise. And y'all are the ones who are going to, calculate the numbers. So the numbers will come. But I think the focus should also be on quality. By that, what I mean is while we will have more women, like maybe in the labor category, right? Or even in our company, we've got women in the lower cadre to an extent, and otherwise we've got women who are on the board, right, or executives at top levels. The middle gap, the middle part of it is where it is missing. And what will, I think in the next 1 year, if we need to also focus on how do we develop that part of the segment which is missing, right? Like what kind of trainings are required, what kind of mindset is required, because either there are women who are very ambitious and they reach the top, or there are women who are like, okay, I'm working, right, while I take care of my house and I do everything. The uncomfortable level is in between. So I think, how do we get that in the Gulf region? Because, there will come a stage where we'll see those numbers change, and it's everybody in the government is going to very proudly say that, oh, we've got so many women, and, it's increased by 50% and all of that. But beyond that, what? Right? And how do we make that sustainable? So that's one. And the other thing, I also think in terms of policies, there will be a lot which will be pushed to corporates or even small scale industries which are big. And like I said, a lot of women are also becoming entrepreneurs. So that's another space to watch out, right? Like when they become entrepreneurs, how do they take it to the next level, and what do they give back, right? And what kind of support do they get from the government? The other thing I also feel is like company like yourself, right, Avatar, uh, the the presence of such groups who do a very how do I say, neutral analysis should help aid. And I'm also a commercial person, so those numbers, right, is the needle moving, and where is it moving? It's not just the needle moving, right? Which direction? So I think that's another thing that should come up. So basically, a lot of awareness, if I may put it in summary, around E&I and how it is important, and around women numbers, etc. But then also focus on quality.
Yeah. Thank you, Radhika. And I think that's how I hope we play that role that you spoke about in terms of driving this change possible. And I just want to quickly share the data. When we launched the best companies for Women India study, the representation in 2016, it was 25% women, right? And it is significantly now increased to almost 37% in the best companies. And that's the kind of a change. And again, almost everyone spoke about the intentionality, right? And that's what the best company study would intends to do, which is put a lot of intent, goals and purposes, track those goals through various matrices that you really laid on, and ensure we're able to do that and actually report back to the leadership team, right, in terms of the progress that is happening. And you also, when you report back, you also report back to a benchmark data with other organizations or with others industry. And there's a lot of insights and value that we provide to the leadership team to stay committed and also put in those efforts and also the money needed for it, right? You want to, if you're putting some money, you're also looking at an outcome actually happening out of it, Radhika, right? Jian, your thoughts?
Sure. Well, I believe, as Maria mentioned, this region has so much potential and so much opportunities that we are looking into. And this region is also maybe under the spotlights, right? It's one of the regions that is considered as one of the most progressive maybe in the world. And, when it comes to innovation, when it comes to speed and to transformation, UAE and the Gulf region, or GCC in general, is one of the most progressive. And I believe that in the coming, let's say, years or months, I think that whatever the UAE and Saudi have already started doing will become a little bit more strengthened in terms of their relationships or partnering the governments and the corporate world. So, for example, the Gender Balance Council that had the initiated a gender balance pledge, for example, to make sure that corporates are committed towards a specific targets and specific quotas in terms of gender equality and inclusiveness in the workplace. So I believe that we will be seeing more of these partnerships and more of a kind of a collaboration between corporates and the government to make sure that they drive DEI forward. And I think the concept of DEI itself is going to be evolving. It's a huge concept that even we don't, we haven't tapped to all of its elements. And as I mentioned in one of the previous questions, there are so many aspects to diversity that we yet have not, included all of them. We are still talking about numbers in terms of gender. There are so many other elements that we can explore, and that could have a positive implications on our businesses and on our growth as companies. So I believe that this is something that we will witness hopefully sometime soon.
Yeah. Thank you, John. As you said, it's evolving every day as we see. And with respect to not just from a gender perspective, I think that is one aspect of it. There are many more aspects when you look at the person with disability and people from different nationality, religion, and so many others. And within that, you have different intersectionalities coming in. So I think it is evolving. And I think the leaders like you and the organization that you represent, I think we are on a good wicket in terms of, really have stay focused, stay committed with a lot more intent and purpose. And we really, from our perspective, from Avtar's perspective, when we launched the study last year, again it was purely the belief with which we feel that this needs to be really become a very business imperative. And anything which needs to be a business imperative, it cannot be just some sort of just can remain with belief, right? It needs to have a clear strategy. I think Radhika, you spoke about that strategy part of it. Maria, again, you also spoke about the targets and goals, and then the entire aspect of how do you do it, right? One is to have the strategy, the goals, and the specific matrices, but you also need to operationalize this, and you need to track them and to show if they're giving the progress. And we hope with the best companies for women study, we will able to bring that transformation through the research, through data. I think you all talked about the importance of data, right? And the various insights that we're really going to get from organizations like you who are doing some amazing work. And we hope, along with you, to make this very positive impact in the Gulf region and in all the organizations that are in the Gulf. Thanks a lot for your time. I think we had some great conversation, some great insights, and some of them are very practical, something that we can just go back and implement and do it. Thanks a lot for your time. We are going to have this series of conversation specifically focus on the Gulf region, and we would love you to be there in those discussions. And also all the people that have joined today, please stay in touch with us. Thanks a lot for all your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Rashmi.
Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists, and thank you to Karthik. Loads of takeaways there. Panelists spoke about the importance of inclusion to start from the top, and for organizations to have focus on inclusive policies and practices, to have women own their own story and need to catch them young, mentoring and skilling them. As also tracking data on gender inclusion being crucial to ensure we are on track. Some of those key takeaways that I took away from, and tracking data is exactly what BCWG helps companies do. So do log into the site that has been mentioned in the chat window to take this further. We will also be sharing communication with you more on the study and the registration. What a fantastic session we have had today. Thank you so much to the panelists for joining us today, and from Manju's enlightening presentation on the BCWG study to the dynamic panel we just had. I hope you all leave inspired and empowered to champion gender inclusion in your own workplaces. And on behalf of the organizing team, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our speakers, the moderator, and of course, all of you for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you for those engaging questions. Let's continue to drive meaningful change together. Have a great evening. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you all.